Hi, friends, and welcome. I am your hot mess of a host, Mary Hendricks from The Very Merry Life, your new mom friend that soon will feel like an old friend. Twice a week, every week, I want you to come and join me as we cover moments in motherhood, marriage, sex, and more. Some moments worth savoring, others worth surviving, all with a laugh, pep talk, or F-bomb every now and again. I want you to come as you are, but leave the sugarcoating behind because, guys, we know how sweet it already is. So what do you say? Up for picking some daisies? All right. Hi, guys. Hi, Carolyn. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. All right. So this is going to be a great episode, especially if anyone here listening deals at all with anxiety or just, I mean, I do. So hello. Join the club.
Well. We all do. If you don't, I want to know, and I want to know the secret.
I know, but we're just going to jump right into it. Does anyone not have anxiety in some manner? I think
you have to survive.
You have to, right?
Yeah.
It's a vital.
It's a vital emotion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's important
we'll
to
go
know.
into it. Yeah.
That's all right. Well, okay. Before we jump into it, because that's what I have a problem doing. Sometimes I just get ahead of myself. I want you to introduce yourself, and then we're going to get right on in.
All right. So I am Dr. Carolyn Rubenstein. Call me Carolyn. I am a licensed psychologist in the state of Florida, and I work in private practice. So I work with adults primarily with anxiety, high functioning anxiety, depression. I work with a lot of moms and parents and dealing with burnout, in particular, self-sabotage, all of these fun things that we deal with today in this world, and how to prevent, how to deal, how to overcome all of that. So I do that kind of in my private practice. And then I also share online, and I love both.
Yeah. Which is how we got connected. I forget how we got connected, but I absolutely adore your content, which is.
And I adore yours. I think it was a mutual, just loving.
Love. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think, for me bringing Carolyn on and everything, I think it's an important conversation. And I know you got on your stories before we jumped on to see if there's anything in particular anyone wants us to talk about or touch on. And I think you had mentioned that a lot of people had asked about showing up authentically. And I think anxiety definitely boils in to that tremendously.
Yes.
I know for me, I have anxiety. That's the reason why, I've always told people I don't get my nails done because I will
pick them.
I'll pick them or I'll bite them
but that usually is a good way to not do it as well, because if you love your nails, you won't want to.
I know I probably should.
That doesn't work for you.
I don't know. You know what, I don't bite my nails as bad anymore. They're okay. I actually always tell people, and especially my husband knows, he says that the state of my anxiety typically is always shown on the sides of my thumbs.
Oh my gosh,
bite like that.
Most people, you can tell somehow in their hands. There is something you can see either in present, they're shaking or whatever, or you can see nails biting. Hands are a big tell.
Yeah.
So I always look. Yeah.
That and eye contact.
Eye contact for sure.
Huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. Yeah. And I have anxiety, and my anxiety actually has gotten worse since I've had kids, which I'm sure you've probably encountered.
I should have mentioned that as well. I have 2 kids as well. So I have, a 5 and a 9-year-old. So I encounter it personally and professionally, in terms of experiencing anxiety, and it, especially, after having a child, even postpartum, there's so much to worry about forever. Forever. You cannot stop the worrying. It's always going to be there. So it's we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. We just have to kind of embrace that it is a normal part of being a parent. And it is so tough. And I think that's what I love, just validating that it is hard, and it's okay for it to be hard at moments. Yeah. And to also notice the good parts, of it. Yeah. But I think what you were saying before about sharing vulnerably on here, for me, the biggest thing for me that made it the easiest was to own that I was anxious. When I would show up in the beginning, I would own how anxious I was and how awkward this felt. And by owning it, even right now, doing a podcast, it's outside my comfort zone. So I'm anxious, and even owning it reduces the anxiety, because I don't feel like I have to run from it. Yeah. It's okay, I see you, and I'm, you're here with me.
I think that that's probably one of the biggest tips that I can give any person in terms of showing up and doing it. It's the fake it till you make it a little bit, but it's ownership of it, because you'd be surprised. I think the biggest thing I know for me with anxiety is it's more of the fear of anxiety that makes it worse than the anxiety itself. So when I start to feel nervous or I start to feel uncomfortable or anything, typically what has always made it worse is that I feel unsure how to explain it to others. And I almost don't want to explain it to others because it is a taboo thing. It really is, depending on who you talk to with it. And I've always found that that's made it 10 times worse, but instead of just confronting it, because the moment I have, and I think that's what's made it a little bit more comfortable for me to show up, is every time I've ever confronted it, I've always been incredibly supported, because you have no idea how many people, like you were just saying, everyone deals with anxiety in some manner.
Yeah, everyone.
It just, you have to. I think what is it? A sociopath or a psychopath probably doesn't.
Even they do. Even honestly, you have to survive, right? Yeah. So like you really, like even in their mind, we're not going to go into their psychology, but we all do. And that's why that fight or flight mechanism is always kind of ready to go. But for some people, it's kind of always on. And that's where it's not just anxiety, it's more so panic. Yeah. But you need, if there is a bear coming at you, you probably know what to do better than I do. But you need to know what to do in that moment. And that's when your anxiety can tell it takes over in a good way, right? Yeah. It puts you into, just like for sometimes, like if your child is going through, like my daughter went into severe anaphylactic shock. Yeah. And that was in April. So just a few months ago. And anxiety took over, but it allowed me to go through the most probably horrific thing I've ever gone through in my entire life, and to just do the steps I needed to do to keep her alive. Yeah. And so it's like that survival mechanism comes in, and it's like, if I had thought about it before, if I knew that was going to happen, I'd be like, there's no way I could ever make it through it. And like you just get through it. Yeah. And so you're right. It's the fear of it that makes us scared. But once it's there and it's on and it's a real situation, you can deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's Well, and I mean, so boiling into, motherhood and things like that, anxiety definitely for me got introduced through intrusive thoughts. And I would love to hear your thought on those, because that is probably one of the most, I can tell you from my experience of being online and just from not being online and not being a presence on social media. I remember when I had my first daughter back in 2017, I remember my first intrusive thought. I will never forget it. I won't even say it, because it's one of those that no one else needs in their head, but it's one that will be forever with me. And no one talked about intrusive thoughts.
No one, because it's so scary. It's so taboo. Yeah. It's so scary. Most of us experience them, and they're intrusive, right? So they're intrusive for a reason. They're so far against our moral compass, what we believe then they take something that we hold so deeply and threaten it through our own lens. So people, have intrusive thoughts about lots of things, especially when it comes to being a mom. Yeah. And those early days of, I had one, and I also don't want to introduce it, but it was scary. Yeah. And you also, these thoughts, and then you're like, oh my gosh, is there something wrong with me? Yeah. And you start to question it. Most of us have these thoughts. And what happens is, especially when you're in a very vulnerable state, like early motherhood, we will put such a big magnifying glass on that one thought, which then kind of gives it more life. Yeah. And we start to think about it more, and we perseverate, and we keep going and going with this intrusive thought, versus someone who maybe isn't in an anxious state and has that thought and knows what intrusive thoughts are, becomes like white noise. Oh, like that's a really weird thought. I would never even, it's so far out of the realm that you're able to look at it from a distance versus feeling like it completely consumes you.
Well, and that's what it definitely started to do. I think in my early days when I would start having them, and they would make me nauseous. Like they would come out of nowhere, and they would make me nauseous, because it would just be images in my head of like the worst possible scenario ever to happen. And I would sit with it, because I'd then wonder, like, what is wrong with me? Like, what am I going to, and especially during the early postpartum phases, you get terrified. And I think it's important to voice them, because you never know, like you could be dealing with more, but you almost didn't, because I didn't want anyone to be like, oh, something's wrong with you. Cause I was like, I would never act on any of this stuff. I would never do any of this. I would never let this happen.
And that's what makes it intrusive, right? Like that's what makes it so intrusive, is like this thought is something I would never in a million years want to do. I have no desire ever, right? No desire. Like it literally makes me physically ill to even think of this thought.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it intrusive. So if you're having that adverse reaction, it's really important to recognize it as that and to share it like with someone who you feel really safe with. Because and I think especially when you're preparing for early motherhood, to know that and to talk with a partner or a support person about like, oh, these are things that could happen. Like they talk about lots of stuff with the baby. They don't really talk about that postpartum period. They don't talk about intrusive thoughts and how your hormones are all over the place. Yeah. And because of that, you sometimes feel like you don't recognize yourself. And so when you don't recognize yourself for some time, and then this thought comes in that is also not that you don't recognize, you start to really feel like you've left yourself.
You feel like you've left yourself and you feel completely alone. And it is, it's a huge conversation that you have to have with your spouse because and I actually just saw a video and I commented on TikTok and it was a video of, they must have had like a Ring video camera up in their corner of their house. And it was a mom and you can tell mom and dad literally just came out of the nursery and they're closing the door and putting their little one down. And the mom turns and it's comical watching, but she turns to the husband. She said, it's crazy to think that he could, and it's like a 3-month-old, he could climb out of the crib, go down the stairs and launch himself out of the window. Right. And the husband just very, very calmly was like, yes.
Yes. That is an intrusive thought. That is yes.
They heard it. And some of the comments are awful because there are always people that don't understand it. But I commented saying, thank you, because you have no idea how many people need to see that.
Right. That most of us will have some sort of thought like that. Yeah. And it's like having that person there and having someone validate that is so outside the realm of possibility is what helps you to keep things from becoming, where you become consumed by it, right? Because if she didn't have this partner there, she probably would have gone down this rabbit hole and maybe sat outside that kid's door all night and not moved because of that fear.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And for me, my biggest thing and what I learned is like thanking it. Like I like to give it thanks a little bit where I'm like, thank you for watching out for everyone. Cause that's essentially, it is. It's a fight or flight, isn't it?
Yeah, like it's a protective. Yeah. It's trying to protect you. It's overly excited. Yeah. It's overly excited protector. It's like one of those, it's like a little kid who wants to play mom and it's like really excited and wants to like ring the bell nonstop. And you're like, it's okay. Yeah. I know it's super fun, but we can calm down. It's okay. Yeah. But thank you for trying to protect. Yes.
It's so much. And it's just, it's ridiculous. So if anyone else is dealing with that, just know like I guarantee there's not one mom that could admit to not having a thought. Yeah, like
no, there isn't.
There's just varying degrees. There's varying degrees of like how absurd it can get. But trust me, you'll get one at some point.
Yeah, they get absurd.
And I just have found voicing them. Like I even say to my husband, and I think my husband actually he doesn't anymore, but he used to get annoyed with me when I would voice them because he almost thought, like, especially if I had to leave the house, I would go through a list of things. And I think he would almost be like, I have this, like, I'm okay. And I think he thought it was me doubting his abilities of taking care of someone. And I even do this with my mom. I do it with my sister. I do it with anyone that is watching my kids. I just let them know in advance that my brain goes a little haywire when it comes to leaving my kids or anything. And I said, just forgive me, but I probably will text you. I'm probably just going to say this, even though I know you already know it, but I just have to say it because if I don't, I'm going to go bonkers. And you just need to understand that. And thankfully, no one, I think just explaining things like that to others has helped so much.
Because most people will think exactly what your husband thought, which is whenever someone says something out loud, you kind of personalize it. We all do it. Yeah. We all personalize in some way. And so, it just makes you take that away from the person. You say, this is my thing. It's about me. It's not about you. Yeah. And it's, I'm sorry if it's annoying, but this is on me. And I trust you completely. Yeah. So
I just have to say it to make myself feel better. It's almost like a compulsion.
Yes.
just bear with me.
Just bear with me as I go through this. Yeah. Yes. But they also probably feel better. And it probably almost decreases, what you do because you know that you can, and without any, they're not going to think badly of you or whatnot. It doesn't even matter if they do. No. Because you're the mom and you're allowed.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Remember everyone that, okay? Especially if you're the mom, you're allowed on
On every level.
On every level, which actually I want to boil into boundaries, because that was another thing that people had submitted us wanting to talk about. And there's a slew of things that we can talk about with boundaries. And I want to ask, from your experience, what kind of boundaries are moms or people in general asking your feedback in?
Literally every boundary you could think about. And it's something I talk about nonstop with people, because I think in general, people that are interested in boundaries and in, mental health and thinking about this proactively tend to really care about themselves and others. Yeah. And so that's where boundaries are tricky, because boundaries are really for someone who is letting fear dictate their actions. And so someone who is we set up boundaries when, for example, I don't want to tell my mother-in-law that I can't come because I don't want her to get upset. I don't want to deal with that reaction. Yeah. So, I will just make up an excuse that day or whatnot, and you come into these patterns where you're not comfortable going on at a certain time or certain day because of your child's nap schedule or whatnot, or it's your time. And so the reason that you don't say no is because you fear their reaction. You fear their response. And so the main thing with boundaries is not to look at what's motivating you in your actions. So for example, for this example, I don't want to say no because I don't want her to get upset with me in the moment. I can't deal with it. That's what my brain would say. Yeah. And that's not good enough for me. So being afraid of someone's actions, unless it's lethal, is not good enough. So for me, it's okay, that's where I know I need to have a boundary. Yeah. I need to focus on what I need, and then I can deal with the other person's reactions. Everyone's going to have a reaction when we set a boundary, and that is okay. Yeah. Relationships have conflict. They have, boundaries that come and go. We have ups and downs. Every relationship, friendships, marriages, parents, children, we all have conflict, and it's about repairing. And so a relationship where you try to avoid conflict is not healthy. And so I really try to reiterate that to people, where it's okay to have conflicts. If it's a healthy relationship, you're going to build and grow from it.
Well, and I feel boundaries, I know for me, I've talked about boundaries before, everyone in my life has a different boundary of especially people that aren't closely knit in, but there are certain people that I know I can relay certain information to. There are other people that I know I can't.
Yes.
It's just the way it goes. Yeah. But the boundaries exist for a reason, especially if it's someone in my life that I know I want to keep in my life. That boundary has to be there, because if it doesn't, the relationship will not work.
Exactly.
In any manner. And I feel some people get very freaked out by the word boundary because they think it's almost limiting.
Mean. Yeah,
it's mean and it's limiting, but it's not. It's just
I think it's more freeing. It's so empowering. Once you start, you can't really stop. Yeah. It's so empowering where you're no, I don't have to do everything everyone wants. I don't have to do it on everyone's terms, but it's also I can do more, and it's so you feel you actually have choices, and you're not just being reactive to what everyone else wants and needs.
Now, not everyone's going to like a boundary though. Right?
No, most people, it's hard, especially if you're not someone who sets them a lot. In the beginning, there's going to be reactions. And so you have to be able to recognize this is the person's emotions and it's not your own. Yeah. And you can deal with that. You can recognize this is hard to hear a new boundary and to deal with that. Yeah. And, to validate that and to recognize, I know, I haven't really said no before, and this is new, and let's try it and see what happens this time, and just validate that this is new and uncomfortable. Just be human. Validate the situation. If you want a relationship with the person, talk it out and be honest about what's going on and how hard it is for you to set a boundary. Yeah. And it will get easier. But I think that's the thing with anxiety and boundaries and honestly, everything that we're talking about is when we try to hide things and try to keep things in us and keep things secret, and not tell people, it just makes things so much worse and so much harder. Yeah. Overall.
Yeah. I was reading on your page, signs of people with anxiety. And I think it was avoiding eye contact. And one was avoiding messages or text messages or something. That literally.
That's me.
Someone.
Everyone everyone in my life knows this.
If you've never seen me put up a screenshot before on my stories of like I put up one the other day of me and my husband, but you could see how many
oh gosh,
unread messages.
It's I had
74 unread text messages.
I might be able to beat you.
Oh, I wouldn't. Let's see. Let me look what my status is currently right now. I have 84.
Okay, let's see.
And my inbox for emails, and this is granted spam, 6,256 emails. But again, a lot of that is also connected to my spam.
I have 47. So you're actually doing, at times though, I've been over 100. So
it's so bad. Granted, a lot of them are probably spam text messages too, but everyone knows this about me.
Oh, me too.
Where I'm
it's like they know they have to, sometimes there's a workaround, right? They'll have to send it a few times, or they'll have to go to someone around me.
Okay, but do you think is that anxiety? I've always wondered if it's anxiety or if it's ADHD, because I'm like, do I have ADHD? I'm like, what is wrong with me?
I mean, it can be both. It also can be just I'm busy and overwhelmed, and it's like too much mental load, right?
See, it's something. It's like I actually talked about this once before, where I said it's like for example, there are things that I place on my stairs when I have to go upstairs.
Yes,
and I will avoid them until there's a moment, and it's like I literally cannot bring myself to do it. I see them. I know how simple it would be just to pick them up and bring them upstairs. There's like a repulsion in me. I can't tangibly cannot go and pick them up.
So what is it? What is it that you feel when you walk by them?
I don't know. It's probably the anxiety. It's probably, I'm going to have to recognize this from now on, but I literally cannot do it until there's a moment that comes over me that's like, okay, now you can handle it.
We'll be back after a quick break. Eye-Opening Moments podcasts are real-life stories of adversity, encounters, and perspectives. They are moments that can lift your spirits, give you some food for thought, or move you. For the introspective mind that likes to reflect, discover, and find solutions or meaning in a complex life, listen to Eye-Opening Moments podcasts.
Okay. So you can handle. So next time you see it, I just want you to see what happens if you just force yourself to not wait for the motivation and take the action, take that laundry or whatever it is, bring it upstairs and see what you're thinking and feeling. Because that's going to tell you what's going on.
It might be,
it's going to be something, and you'll be able to figure it out in that moment. You're going to see it.
That's going to be my challenge.
Yeah, it's going to get really loud in that moment where you start to go and your brain's saying
like
no,
paralysis. Like I have a paralysis in certain things where I'm like, I literally cannot handle this.
Well, because is it just bringing it up the stairs, or is it I have to put everything away?
It's probably that. It's probably like I can't. Yeah, it's probably that, where I know that if I move. It's like my laundry.
Yeah.
My laundry. I talk about my laundry a lot.
That's worse than the text for me. Yeah.
Oh my God. You should see my laundry room right now. But I have baskets and I avoid it like the plague. And it's because I know that I can't just do.
Right. It's not one step.
No. Yeah. So I just avoid it altogether until I can literally bring myself to tackle all steps.
Right. So when I wonder, so with text messages for me, I think that is also kind of what I avoid. If it's a multi-step response, it's not just a quick checking in, whatever. It's a multi-step, planning things, scheduling, and things that require multiple steps. Those are things that maybe get pushed away until that moment where I'm I'm in schedule mode.
Yeah, that's me. All right. Well, I'm going to have to confront that from now on. I'm glad we talked about that, because that's
yeah, no more avoiding, right? Avoidance is like anxiety's best friend. They're besties. So when avoidance shows up, it's typically anxiety is there, and it's trying to protect you. It's trying to be nice, because if it's something really scary you can avoid, great. Usually though, it's telling you to go approach that thing.
Yeah, it's like my laundry. It's protecting me from my laundry.
Yeah.
It's the worst thing in the world.
Oh, exactly. It does. It feels for you. It feels for you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's awful. Okay. Well, then boiling into that, because I have a lot going on my plate, burnout, which I'm pretty sure, you know what? The first time I ever talked about burnout on my page, I've talked about burnout on my page for over 2 years at this point, but I remember the first time I ever did, so many people were like, that's what it is. And it almost, not many had known about burnout as a mom, there's definitely a lot of shame tacked on.
There's a lot of shame. Yeah. And I think a lot too, it comes down to is the term has always been probably mostly used with like traditional, like, you know, like burnout at like an analyst or something, these occupations. And so when we use it in other realms, people are like, oh no, it doesn't belong there. But absolutely 1000% it does, even more so. Because being a mom is having about 60 different occupations at once. And juggling all of that. And so, burnout is that emotional exhaustion, right? That you feel that's not a physical. I mean, you'll have physical exhaustion, but you could take 10 naps and you're not going to feel all better. You're going to have this sense of like cynicism, detachment, like a sense of like isolation or loneliness. And as moms, like that is built in. I know you shared that recently too. It's built in that loneliness.
And I'm very open about that, but that like literally it was 2.5 weeks ago. It was like the peak, and thankfully I'm almost hyper self-aware sometimes about how I feel, except for leaving things on the stairs. But I knew it. Like I hit a peak where I was like, I am tapped out, and it wasn't even the correct word, but I knew that that's what it was. It was like, I am constantly on and constantly needed. And I'm in a phase of life where it's like, you do a million things at once, and it's just, you can't, you know, I have to keep the kids alive. I have to keep them fed and entertained because God forbid I share that I put them in front of a screen for a little bit. Someone's going to come down on me. Like, I feel like that's definitely something. It's like the wars that we wage on each other too. It's like,
my kids are in front of screens. It's okay. I'm saving up so they can be in therapy forever, but, whatever the cost,
I'll join you.
You know, but it's like, you know, at this point it's for all of our mental health. So, you know, at some point, the whole screen wars, they can continue. It's
just like on top of that. And then you have to maintain your relationships. You have to maintain your marriages, and
then if you go on Instagram, your house has to be like perfectly put together, and all the toys have to be organized.
Dinner has to be cooked. You have to make sure you're signing your kids up for registration for school and then for sports. You have to take them to sports. Like, it's just so much. And you then feel like you can't say anything because you're supposed to enjoy every moment of this, and moms aren't supposed to complain. And
which is that's where we get in trouble. Right. Where we don't say anything. And it's like all of us are struggling. Every mom is struggling.
Well, and I'm actually planning on putting a reel together about like when moms say that we want a break, it doesn't automatically mean that we want alone time either.
No.
Like, and that's the biggest misconception. And also the whole misconception that self-care and a break are like
the same.
The same. They are not. But I'm putting that together of being like, that's the conversation that needs to happen. It's like, I don't always want, like, that burnout doesn't always come from me not having alone time. Like, obviously that definitely helps of being able to have time to myself and things, but it's I want time away from the guilt of constantly everything. I want time to be able to sit and like enjoy my family without someone losing their mind. And I want someone to not rush me to eat or go to the bathroom, or I want to like be able to sit and envelop what I'm in and enjoy it. And I feel like sometimes,
like what you said about having the dinners recently, right? With your husband, and like it just allowing that time, because not having to deal with like the kid, like being able to enjoy that. Right. Enjoy that together. And I
feel like that's where the big burnout comes from, is like, we're constantly, I think it's the guilt. I feel like guilt just eats us up. And I feel like that's just one thing that we can't escape.
I always say that. And I think because a lot of people, myself included, I'll use the guilt as like, oh, I can't do it because I feel too guilty. And now I'm like, you know what? I'm doing it, and guilt is going to be there because I know I'm not doing anything wrong. And so, you know, fundamentally, I know I'm not doing anything wrong. And so I have to like look at the guilt and know that this is just a feeling that is for some reason hardwired into me, but it doesn't actually mean that I'm doing anything wrong. Like, emotions are there. There are pieces of information, but we get to be the CEO, and we get to look at this, you know, piece of information that we're being presented with and decide what to do with it. And it's not like we can shred it, but we decide if we're going to put it in the back of the room or if we're going to make it, you know, the speaker of the day.
Now, would you say that guilt and anxiety have to go hand in hand?
I mean, they're very, very strongly
because I think
related.
for me, like I'm trying to think about it now, like my guilt. So this is my husband and I are going on a trip in November. And one, I'm terrified because I'm terrified of flying on planes. But I have
That's a whole other episode.
That's a whole other episode. I'm gonna have to tackle someone on that one. But,
I love that one. That one's my favorite. It's so fun.
Do
you hate it?
I hate flying. I hate flying so much.
I don't mind flying, but I love working with people on that exposure because it's so treatable. It's so
really?
Like, oh yeah, it's so you can so easily overcome it.
I might have to talk to you more on that one.
Exposure to the fears of you just do graduated exposure.
I literally was online last night because we're going to London, which is so much fun. Like I am so excited.
International flights are the best flights. They're the biggest planes. They're the most experienced.
What happens if the engine goes out over the ocean?
Okay. So those are what if thoughts. That's anxiety, and you come down to it. We're going to start getting you to listen to podcasts or pilots.
I'm going to chat with you more on this. We're going to have to do maybe another episode on this one. But the guilt factor in that, like I have had multiple nights of me just sitting up at night. My husband knows that. He's great because he knows that he lets me sleep in as long as possible in the morning because he knows that I cannot fall asleep at night because sometimes my anxiety hits me at night and it's the worst thing ever. And I'll just lay in bed thinking about everything. But one of those is the going away. And there is a guilt over going. But I also think there's an anxiety portion being if I go and something happens, then I'm going to guilt myself forever for not being there. And it's almost like this anxiety of anxiety.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Does that make
sense? It's catastrophic thinking too. Yeah. It's but it's not logical because that you could go to the supermarket and something like anything.
I know.
At any time. I know. And so you have to, and also recognize that like you deal with things every single day that come up in your life with your kids. And it's a daily thing. And being in London you're not leaving the universe. You know, you are still their mom. You will be okay.
Yeah.
The telephones work there, surprisingly. And you will be able to communicate and you will be able to manage. And I think just reminding yourself of that, none of us are ever prepared for something catastrophic to happen.
Yeah, that's true.
In any case, anywhere. So it doesn't matter, you know, that in that sense. So, but for everything else, like you deal with it.
Yeah.
And even in London, you will be able to call the school. You'll be able to do whatever you need to do in London.
That's true.
And just reminding yourself of that.
We're gonna
and knowing that,
before I go.
I think also like that nighttime anxiety that I don't think you're in, like every mom has this nighttime anxiety and I think for some reason, it's almost like we do a lot of things during the day. And then we get to that point where we're finally like still. And like our brain is like, okay, what do I do with this stillness? Yeah. And so it's kind of running in circles with certain thoughts. And it feels like we're doing something. Yeah. It feels like we're doing something about this big thing that's happening in November. It makes us feel like we have a sense of control because we're focused on it. But it's an illusion. And I think it's like leaning into that fact of accepting that we can't control every aspect. And
I know. That's like
scary.
The portion. I know. I gotta
it's
like
scary.
work on that one. It is. It literally is control. It's never gotten to a point where it's like OCD, but it's definitely like
and all moms, I think most moms feel that wanting to control and keep things, you know, keep their kids safe and keep things, you know, going for them. Like you're in charge, you're running their life, you know, like you are the engine. And so it's a lot of pressure. Yeah.
Oh God. Moms are kick-ass. Seriously.
We seriously are. And dads. We all are. But
and dads. Yes. Dads. You know, it's funny. I actually thought about this the other day because I was, you know, with my content and stuff like that and your content, we put more of our content out for moms. Yeah. And sometimes that is the thing that like, it frustrates me that like there's not many dad pages. Like there are dad pages, but I don't feel like they are needing it as much as us. And that's like the thing that peeves me sometimes where I'm like, why is this? But I also think it's just the way we're hardwired.
I think so too. Yes. And I think there's just expectations, right? I think a lot of it comes down to external expectations that are placed on moms that are way beyond our control, that have been there forever and that we're kind of playing against.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I love this conversation. This is so
I do too. It's what I talk about all day, every day. It's so much fun.
Yeah. I know. And you're probably getting a bunch of it's amazing how much moms have on their plate, especially because this is like That's overwhelming. The anxiety portion is like an overwhelming portion that I feel like it's so hard to explain. And I think, like, I know for me, and especially like my husband, he doesn't really understand the anxiety. So like the other day, Friday, when I couldn't get on my stories, like it was just way too much for me. I had anxiety, like bad. And I know when I have it, and my husband doesn't have anxiety. So when I tell him that, he's like, well, what's wrong? And I'm like, nothing. That's the point. Like this happens typically when nothing is wrong for me, where I'm like, that's just how it works. Kev, I was like, picture being chased by a tiger. And that's what your body's reactions are. So it's like, it's not me. Like everything's fine in my head. It's just my body is like, run.
So it was like physical.
Yeah. Heart palpitations. I get heart palpitations and like I constantly am taking giant breaths. Like I need to release a weight off of me and it doesn't work. And it's so frustrating. That feeling is probably my worst. I think that's honestly my worst anxiety symptom that I have, because that almost envelops all of me. When I feel like I can't get a full breath in, I almost get panicked because I'm like, something's wrong with me. Something's going on. And then like I could probably brush that off if it weren't like that, but because it takes over the entirety of me, I can't even focus on my tasks at hand. So then I'm scattered. And then I'm snappy and I'm irritable because I've said it before. I feel like I'm trying to keep my feet planted on the ground when I'm having an anxiety moment like that, but I feel like I'm hovering, and it's like you're forcing yourself to ground yourself and you can't. And it's a very like,
it's scary.
Yeah. I've never gotten a full blown panic attack. It's never gotten to that level, but I can only imagine. But I know as a kid, and that's how like anxiety is one of those things that I'm like, I love talking about now, especially because I think my son has anxiety.
I was going to say, even when we're talking about moms having anxiety, it's also talking about our kids, because our kids do have, and it's more and more young kids. And
and it's not anything that you've done too. So I want to say that too.
Both of my kids have anxiety.
It's just a physical response to overstimulation. But my son has it. And I know for me, like I definitely had it as a kid. And now looking back as an adult, I know what those moments were. I would have moments sitting in my bedroom and feeling like I couldn't grasp on to things. And as a kid, I would go downstairs and ask my mom to like scratch and rub my back. And she didn't really understand. But now looking back, I'm like, that's what you were experiencing. You were experiencing anxiety symptoms, but had no clue how to communicate that to anyone.
Because you can't even communicate it to yourself at that point, right? No. You're so overwhelmed in that moment, and your body is telling your brain that things are not okay, right? Yeah. This is a bad situation. And so like the key is like, if there is an ability for you to like take even 5 minutes away from all the noise and stuff, which is not easy on the spur of the moment to do that, and like get somewhere where you feel safe, like a closet, anywhere that you feel safe, and can like take a moment to drink some water if you're able to get it down, cold water, hold some ice, like help your body to like physically know that you're okay, and start telling yourself, like even if you have to write it down or record something that you can watch of yourself in a very calm state, saying like, I'm okay. You know, this is what my body does some of the times, but I am physically safe right now. Yeah. And like, try to remind yourself of that. Like the message from your head has to be very calming. It's like what you would say to your child, which is if they were having these physical symptoms, you wouldn't say like, oh my God, I think you're dying. Right. You would say, this is okay. Let's sit down. Let's take a beat here. Let's take a moment, and kind of approaching yourself in that moment with that calm voice. It actually starts to regulate your nervous system, which is because when your nervous system goes like haywire, your brain is going to kind of go with that. And
that's what it is. And that's and it's one of those things. That's why I think it's such an important conversation too, because I think more moms probably have anxiety. Everyone, like we said, everyone has anxiety, but I think some of us have no clue that that's what it is. Yeah. And I know for me, like I said, on Friday, my husband was off of work, so he was able to keep the kids out of my hair. But anytime I would lose it on them, because like I said, I couldn't, it was like, picture not feeling good. If someone's bothering you, like that's what it is. And I couldn't even like, I could see straight, but it felt like I couldn't. Like that's just what it felt like. It's like I couldn't get one clear thought to sit in my head because everything was all over. So if I have my kids asking me for juice and whatever, I was like, I can't do this right now.
Right. No, your cup is completely full. And if like you put one more drop in it, it's going to like explode. Yeah.
And how many of us have lost it on our kids because of moments
everyone.
Like that? And then we feel like crap over it.
And then you feel worse. Yeah.
And then we feel worse. And then we make it worse.
Yeah. And then you lose it again. Yeah. And you feel worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a cycle. It kind of continues to go and go and go until you notice that like all of us have days like that.
Yeah.
We all do. We all have days where we feel like we just can't handle one more thing.
Yeah.
And I think recognizing that and that there's nothing wrong with you for feeling that way, and everyone's break or what that looks like to have time for yourself is going to be different, but figuring out in advance if there are ways for you to have even 5 minutes of a break, of in whatever way that looks. It might be stepping outside.
Yeah.
And in looking at the sun, the nature, not having to say yes or no to a kid, giving them a screen, whatever you need to do to have that break.
All right. Well, I absolutely love this. Like I said, everyone in the show notes, please check out Carolyn. I'm going to link her Instagram. I don't know if you have a website. If so,
yeah, whatever. Yeah, we'll put it, all of it. And it's all on Instagram too.
Yeah.
So
and then on this episode, I'm assuming that this episode came out on the day that you're seeing a reel on Instagram or anything like that. Head to that and tell us about your anxiety or tell us about burnout or
all of
any of that stuff, because you're not alone in it one bit.
You're not alone. We're both there with you.
Yeah. 100%. So awesome. Well, thank you. Another episode down. Thank you all so much for listening. If you loved today's episode, I would be so appreciative if you would leave a rating and review. I cannot begin to tell you how much those mean to me, but also how much they help me get in front of more eyes and more ears. As always, be sure to check back every Tuesday and Friday for a new episode, whether it's an episode with me and my husband, me and Katie, or just another incredible, amazing guest. Stay tuned for more honest, real, raw chit-chat. And hey, do me a favor before you go. Remind yourself how amazing you are, how enough you are, how special you are. And boy, oh boy, I sure am glad to have you here. Thanks, friend.